This took place in the summer of 2017 in the small town of Alexandria Bay, New York. My parents own a small vacation house there, and we usually go down for a few weeks during summer break. It was your typical Saturday night. My parents were out partying with friends, and I was chilling out playing video games. I heard a noise from the docking area outside where my dad keeps his yacht. My initial thought was that my parents had come back early. It was around midnight, and that would have been pretty early for my parents since they usually come back around 3 in the morning. I just continued playing my game and paid no attention to the fact that someone could have been trying to steal my dad's boat. In fact, I forgot about it entirely. Around 2 in the morning, I exited the house to have a smoke, and I saw that the doors to the yacht's main cabin were open, and there was no lights on inside. I grabbed a flashlight and boarded the yacht. I didn't turn on any lights because if there was someone on my father's yacht, I wanted the element of surprise. Now, I considered the fact that my mom and dad were doing something that I absolutely did not want to see under any circumstances. But I didn't see their car anywhere outside. So I came to the conclusion that there was someone on my dad's boat who wasn't supposed to be there. I heard footsteps down in the lower levels where the sleeping quarters were. At this point, I'm fired up, and I'm ready to teach some asshole a lesson about intruding on someone else's property. I hid behind the wall that separated the cabin area from the kitchen, and peered out just enough to see what was going on. Soon after, I saw the silhouette of a man emerge from the stairwell at the opposite end of the room. Now, I had turned off my flashlight, and the only source of light was the moonlight coming through the long window that rimmed around the cabin. Point being is that it was fairly dark, but my eyes had adjusted. I saw the shadow move in front of the long window. It was a slim figure. Now, me being 6'2", 250 pounds, built like a linebacker, I thought I would be able to take this guy on easy. I came from around the corner and yelled, "Hey, fucker!" and lowered my shoulder. I was expecting to knock this guy on his ass, but something strange happened. Now again, it was pretty dark, so I can only speculate. But the intruder somehow was able to jump up and grab onto something hanging from the ceiling, and avoid my charge entirely, causing me to hit the wall pretty hard. I flipped onto my back to see the intruder coming towards me with something in his hands. He was seconds away from hitting me or possibly stabbing me, so I had to think fast. I raised my right leg and landed a kick to the stomach. The intruder grunted and stumbled backwards, dropping whatever he was holding. As soon as I stood back up, I saw the figure dart out of the open doors. A loud splash followed shortly after. The intruder had disappeared into the water below. When I turned on the lights, there was a serrated knife laying on the floor of the cabin. I called the police who came out and investigated, but aside from the knife, they found no traces of the intruder anywhere. I gave my statement and filed a report. My folks came home at a record-breaking 6 a.m., and I decided that I would fill them in on what happened when they woke up. They were in no shape to process this information when they came home, if you know what I mean. Please take care to make sure that everything is locked up tight before you go to bed. You never know when some lunatic may be out looking for a place to crash or to steal something of yours. And also keep in mind that some don't mind confrontation. Before I begin this story, I just want to tell everyone to always be aware of your surroundings. Even if you think you're in a safe place, danger can just be around the corner. I live in a small town in Utah. In my town, there's a park that is pretty well known throughout the state. It has a small creek, perfect trees to hammock in, and basketball courts. There's also a small playground with a hiking trail that sits next to it. It was late on a Friday night. I was hanging out with my friends Eli and Ben. I was a sophomore at the time, and I was pretty cocky and arrogant. Basically, I thought I was invincible. We screwed around at the local Walmart for about an hour or two, before heading out to the park I mentioned earlier. We bought some water balloons before heading to the park, and planned on having a water balloon fight. When we finally got there, I started feeling sick from all the crap I had eaten earlier. I didn't have the healthiest eating habits back then. I decided to sit under a pavilion and relax for a bit, My two friends went into the park's bathroom and started to fill up their water balloons, leaving me by myself. I turned my music on and almost dozed off. I sat up and refocused myself. At the same time, my friends were just coming out of the bathroom with their water balloons, laughing and calling each other names. When they saw me, the laughing stopped. They started whispering at me, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. Not knowing what was going on, I got up and started walking towards them. Ben then yelled, "Turn around!" And as I did, my heart stopped beating. There was a very tall man standing only a few yards behind me. I would say he was around 6 feet tall. He was wearing what appeared to be a black overcoat with a hood over his head, and from where he was standing, his face was concealed by darkness. Right before I started running, I saw two things in each of the man's hands. In his left hand was a carcass of a dead rabbit, and in his right was a bloody kitchen knife. The man dropped the dead rabbit and started sprinting at us. The man let out one of those haunting, insane laughs while he gave chase. I sprinted as fast as I could, with my friends a few steps ahead of me. We came under the rays of a nearby streetlight. I turned back and saw the shadow of the man who had chased us. He was at the edge of a nearby tree line, maybe about 150 feet away, looking at us, waving his knife, and still laughing like a maniac. At that moment, a police car sped past us, probably going 60 on our 25. He was shining a spotlight into the park. As soon as the light hit the tree line, the man disappeared. Later, my friends explained to me that the man was hiding behind a tree, watching me while I was listening to music. He started moving towards me, and that's when they started calling to me. A couple of weeks later, there were reports of people being attacked and stabbed on that trail. I'm grateful that I never ended up in those news articles or an autopsy report. I truly believe that if my friends weren't there to help me, I wouldn't even be able to tell my story. I've never returned to that park at night, nor will I ever. Please always be aware of your surroundings. You never know who might be lurking in the darkness.
This story takes place during Thanksgiving break, when I was in the 5th grade. My old elementary school had a termite problem, and the school board decided to move the school to the local YMCA. We were told that the infestation was more severe than they thought, and it would take about 1.5 years to deal with. When the school was under construction, me and my brother Jack decided to go and check things out. This school never had any rumors about being haunted or anything like that, so we weren't really expecting anything to happen. We walk around looking at all the demolished walls and piles of old wood and glass. We weren't the only ones who had this bright idea, because we saw inappropriate content, either drawn or written on some of the classroom chalkboards. Jack and I just about had our fill of this place, and we decided to check out one more classroom before leaving. The chalkboard in that room had a message written on it. "Look under the sink." So my brother, being the stupid person that he is, goes to the sink and opens it up. There was nothing there, but as soon as he stood up, we heard a loud crash. We both looked to the far end of the classroom. There was a man in a white phantom mask. I recognized it from the play my school did of Phantom of the Opera. The man proceeded to walk along the row of classroom windows and shattered each of them with a crowbar. Jack and I rushed out of the room and down the long hallway to the exit. While running, we both remembered hearing loud footsteps behind us. I also remember hearing someone yelling, but it could have just been my mind playing tricks on me due to the state of panic I was in. When we got back to our house, we didn't say a word about this to anyone, because we didn't want to get into trouble being in that school after hours while it was still under construction. When the school was finally operational again, we didn't hear anything about shattered windows or a masked man with a crowbar. Seeing how we clearly weren't the only ones who decided to trespass, I imagined that there was a few instances of vandalism that the construction crew had to deal with. I know that kids, especially at this age, can have wild imaginations, but encountering real danger is something you'll never forget. I don't know if the phantom was trying to scare us or wanted to bash our heads in, but my brother and I weren't sticking around to find out.
I'm a female, and this happened during spring break of 2011. At the time, I lived in New Jersey, and I would often drive out to the Pine Barrens on Saturdays and jog along a trail that a friend of mine showed me. I don't mean to be vague, but for the life of me I can't remember the name of this trail, but I do remember that it was located in South Jersey, and from what I understand there's lots of trails that run through that area. During this time, I was going through some health problems, and I was really focused on losing weight. During my jogs, I would often listen to my headphones. I had a playlist on my iPod that would help me get motivated. After parking my car, I set off on foot. I usually saw one or two other backpackers or joggers traversing the trail, but today, there was no one. About 30 minutes after I started, I got this feeling that I was being watched. I tried my best to brush it off as I continued down the path. This feeling became more and more prevalent. It felt like the forest itself was closing in on me. It got to the point where I stopped jogging and took out my headphones and listened carefully. I heard several frantic footsteps coming from behind the surrounding trees. At this point, I was becoming a bit unnerved, but I figured that it could be some kids just messing around. I called out, asking if anyone was there, but got no response. I should mention that on this particular trail, about a half a mile from its starting point, your cell phone was all but useless. After a minute or two of just standing there, I decided that it was time to cut this jog short. As soon as I turned around, I heard a rustling sound from behind me. I turned, and what I saw utterly horrified me. A masked man wearing a pair of boxers emerged from a bush that was alongside the trail. I know that may sound comical to some of you, but I assure you it was not. The mask this person was wearing is kind of hard to describe. It looked like an animal head of some kind, and just sort of hung off this guy's head, like it was several sizes too big for him. The most disturbing part of all was this half-naked maniac was covered in what looked like blood. It was like I was involuntarily thrusted into the plot of a horror movie. I took off running down the trail. As I did, I heard laughter and shouting coming from several directions behind me. I thankfully found my way back to the car in one piece. I drove out of there like a bat out of hell. I pulled over at the nearest gas station and immediately called the police. It took them almost an hour and a half to get out there, and he informed me that he would call in more cops and comb the area. He told me that someone from his department would eventually follow up with me. The next morning, I got a phone call from the police. They, of course, didn't find anyone matching the description I gave. However, they did find the skinned carcass of a deer not far from where I had encountered the man. I don't have confirmation on this, but thinking back to how strange that mask looked, I have to ask a question. Was that man wearing fresh deer skin? Hey folks, it's your Uncle Unit, and I hope you enjoyed the video. A big thank you to my friend Vidith22 for joining me in this episode of Based on True Events. I'll leave a link to his channel in the description. And if you would like your story to be featured in this series, type it up and send it over to unit522stories@outlook.com. I hope to hear from you soon, and as always, never forget.